Book 2, Chapters 20, 21 and 22 of The Blue Lagoon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Adrian Pretzelis. The Blue Lagoon by H. de Vere Stagpool. Chapter 20. The Keeper of the Lagoon. The woods here had been less affected by the cyclone than those upon the other side of the island, but there had been destruction enough. To reach the place he wanted, Dick had to climb over felled trees and fight his way through a tangle of vines that had once hung overhead. The banana trees had not suffered at all. As if by some special dispensation of Providence, even the great bunches of fruit had been scarcely injured, and he proceeded to climb and cut them. He cut 2 bunches, and with one across his shoulder came back down through the trees. He had got half across the sands, his head bent under the load, when a distant call came to him, and, raising his head, he saw the boat adrift in the middle of the lagoon, and the figure of the girl in the bow of it, waving to him with her arm. He saw a scull floating on the water, half-way between the boat and the shore, which she had no doubt lost in an attempt to paddle the boat back. He remembered that the tide was going out. He flung his load aside and ran down the beach. In a moment he was in the water. Emmeline, standing up in the boat, watched him. When she found herself adrift, she had made an effort to row back, and in her hurry shipping the sculls she had lost one. With a single scull she was quite helpless, as she had not the art of sculling a boat from the stern. At first she was not frightened, because she knew that Dick would soon return to her assistance. But as the distance between the boat and shore increased, a cold hand seemed laid upon her heart. Looking at the shore, it seemed very far away, and the view towards the reef was terrific, for the opening had increased in apparent size, and the great sea beyond seemed drawing her to it. She saw Dick coming out of the wood with the load on his shoulder, and she called to him. At first he did not seem to hear. Then she saw him look up, cast the bananas away, and come running down the sand to the water's edge. She saw him swimming, she saw him seize the scull, and her heart gave a great leap of joy. Towing the scull and swimming with one arm, he rapidly approached the boat. He was quite close, only 10 feet away, when Emmeline saw behind him, sheering through the clear rippling water and advancing with speed, a dark triangle that seemed made of canvas stretched upon a sword point. 40 years ago he had floated adrift on the sea, in the form and likeness of a small shabby pine-cone, a prey to anything that might find him. He had escaped the jaws of the dogfish, and the jaws of the dogfish are a very wide door. He had escaped the albacore and the squid. His life had been one long series of miraculous escapes from death. Out of 1 billion like him born in the same year, he and a few others only had survived. For 30 years he had kept the lagoon to himself, as a ferocious tiger keeps a jungle. He had known the palm tree on the reef when it was a seedling, and he had known the reef even before the palm tree was there. The things he had devoured, flung one upon another, would have made a mountain, yet he was as clear as enmity as a sword, as cruel and as soulless. He was the spirit of the lagoon. Emmeline screamed and pointed to the thing behind the swimmer. He turned, saw it, dropped the oar, and made for the boat. She had seized the remaining scull and stood with it poised. Then she hurled it blade foremost at the form in the water, now fully visible and close on its prey. She could not throw a stone straight, yet the scull went like an arrow to the mark, balking the pursuer and saving the pursued. In a moment more his leg was over the gunwale, and he was saved. But the scull was lost. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21. The Hand of the Sea. There was nothing in the boat that could possibly be used as a paddle. The scull was only 5 or 6 yards away, but to attempt to swim to it was certain death. Yet they were being swept out to sea. He might have made the attempt, only that on the starboard quarter the form of the shark, gently swimming at the same pace as they were drifting, could be made out only half veiled by the water. The bird, perched on the gunwale, seemed to divine their trouble, for he rose in the air, made a circle, and resumed his perch with all his feathers ruffled. Dick stood in despair, helpless, his hands clasping his head. The shore was drawing away before him, the surf loudening behind him, yet he could do nothing. The island was being taken away from them by the great hand of the sea. Then, suddenly, the little boat entered the race formed by the confluence of the tides, from the right and left arms of the lagoon. The sound of the surf suddenly increased, as though a door had been flung open. The breakers were falling, and the seagulls crying on either side of them, and for a moment the ocean seemed to hesitate as to whether they were to be taken away into her wastes or dashed on the coral strand. Only for a moment this seeming hesitation lasted. Then the power of the tide prevailed over the power of the swell, and the little boat, taken by the current, drifted gently out to sea. Dick flung himself down beside Emmeline, who was seated in the bottom of the boat, holding the child to her breast. The bird, seeing the land retreat, and wise in its instinct, rose into the air. It circled thrice round the drifting boat, and then, like a beautiful but faithless spirit, passed away to the shore. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22. Together. The island had sunk slowly from sight. At sundown it was just a trace, a stain on the southwestern horizon. It was before the new moon, and the little boat lay drifting. It drifted from the light of sunset into a world of vague violet twilight, and now it lay drifting under the stars. The girl, clasping the baby to her breast, leaned against her companion's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. All the wonders in their short existence had culminated in this final wonder, this passing away together from the world of time, this strange voyage they had embarked on. To where? Now that the first terror was over, they felt neither sorrow nor fear. They were together. Come what might, nothing could divide them. Even should they sleep and never wake up, they would sleep together. Had one been left and the other taken, as though the thought had occurred to them simultaneously, they turned one to the other, and their lips met, their souls met, mingling in one dream, whilst above in the windless heaven space answered space with flashes of sidereal light, and Canopus shone and burned like the pointed sword of Azrael. Clasped in Emmeline's hand was the last and most mysterious gift of the mysterious world they had known, the branch of crimson berries. End of chapter 22. End of book 2.